Hi there, guys. I am back again, and I am going to read today the classic story of Cinderella. And I say classic because it's the original tale of Cinderella about a sister who lives with two other sisters who are very wicked and very mean, and a stepmother who's also very mean. But Cinderella finds her prince in the end. And for those of you that know the story, you get to enjoy it again. And for those of you that have never heard this story, you will get to enjoy the story of Cinderella for the very first time. So let's read Cinderella. There she is in her dress that looks like she made it from patches of material, and she's got all her cleaning stuff, because all she does all day is clean, 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 and do housework, because she is made to by her mean sisters. This story is retold by Barbara Carlin, but it is based on the original Cinderella. And Cinderella got her name. Her actual name was Ella, but they call her Cinderella because she's always sweeping up cinders from the fireplace. I don't know if you knew that. Once there was a widower. That means that is a man who his wife has passed away, with a kind and beautiful daughter. Life was sweet in their simple cottage until the widower decided to remarry. Not knowing the ways of the world, he married a vain and horrid woman, whose two daughters were as vain and horrid as she. What a stupid little house, they said. So he married this lady, and her two daughters came with her, and the book says that, or the story says, they are very vain. Vain means they think a lot of themselves, that they think only of themselves, and they think that they are just gorgeous, and that they are the prettiest women around. And here is Cinderella meeting them for the first time. The widower's daughter was made to work like a servant in her own house. She was soon run ragged, washing, ironing, scrubbing, dusting, and cooking heaps of food. So the new wife and the daughters, her daughters, treated Cinderella like a servant, even though that was her house. The poor girl no longer had a bed of her own, and had to sleep among the ashes and cinders. And from that time on, they called her Cinderella. That's how she got her name. See, she's covered in dirty cinders. That's the ashes from the fireplace. Now, it happened that the king of the land had a handsome son. The king's greatest desire was to see his son married. He decided to give a ball and invite all the fair maidens of the realm. So there's the king, and there's his son, the prince, and he wants him to get married. So he's going to invite all the beautiful maidens of the kingdom. When the king's messenger delivered the royal invitation, the dreadful stepsisters were overjoyed. Each was convinced that she would win the prince's favor. On the day of the ball, Cinderella was exhausted from trying to make her stepsisters look beautiful. "Wouldn't you like to go to the ball?" they teased her cruelly. "Oh, yes," said Cinderella. "Don't be ridiculous," cried the stepsisters. "What would a wretched mouse like you do at a fancy ball?" And they shrieked with laughter. They're mean. Thinking themselves beautiful beyond words, the stepsisters left for the ball. "Don't be a lazybones while we're away," they said to Cinderella, "and think about all the fun we'll be having." After her stepsisters had gone, Cinderella went about her chores. As she worked, she wept bitterly. "You look so miserable, child," said a kind voice. I think I know who that is." "Who are you?" said Cinderella. I, replied the plump little woman, am your fairy godmother. Please tell me why you are crying. I want so much to go to the ball, said Cinderella. Oh, that should not be too difficult to arrange, said the fairy godmother. But you must do as I say. First, fetch me a nice big pumpkin from the garden. Cinderella brought the biggest pumpkin she could find. Now, said the fairy godmother, I will require 6 white mice and a fine fat rat. Cinderella brought them live from the trap. And finally, said the fairy godmother, I must have 2 lizards. You might look behind the watering pail. And so Cinderella did as she was told. With a touch of her wand, the fairy godmother changed the pumpkin into a magnificent golden coach, the mice into 6 white horses, the rat into a jolly coachman, and the lizards into 2 sleek footmen. Lovely, the fairy godmother exclaimed. Off you go. Am I to go in rags? Said Cinderella. Oh, silly me, said the fairy godmother. And she transformed Cinderella's filthy rags into an elegant gown and on her feet placed a pair of sparkling glass slippers. Now you are ready, said the fairy godmother. But remember this, you must return home before the stroke of midnight. For then all your finery will change back to what it was. Cinderella promised to obey, and then she was off to the ball. At the palace, the prince learned that an enchanting maiden had arrived, and he greeted her himself. The other guests were puzzled. Who was this beautiful stranger? Completely smitten, the prince had eyes only for Cinderella. They danced every dance, and Cinderella found herself deeply in love. She was so happy that she took no notice of the hour. Suddenly, the clock began to strike 12. And remember, her fairy godmother said she had to be home by 12. Remembering the warning, Cinderella ran from the prince's arms, out of the ballroom, and down the steps of the palace. In her haste, that means hurry, in her hurry, she lost one of her glass slippers. Wait, wait, called the prince. I don't even know your name. Cinderella's golden coach sped away from the palace, but at the stroke of 12, the fairy godmother's warning came true. The coach was changed back into a pumpkin, the horses back into mice, the coachman back into a rat, and the footmen back into lizards. Cinderella was once again dressed in rags. Discovering the tiny glass slipper, the prince vowed to find, and not only find, but marry the beautiful stranger. He traveled the kingdom far and wide, trying the slipper on every maiden's foot, but it fit no one. Finally, he arrived at Cinderella's house. "Me first!" cried the elder stepsister, extending her long, skinny foot. But she could manage to get only her toes into the slipper. "My turn!" cried the younger stepsister, thrusting her pudgy foot at the prince. She pushed and shoved, grunted and groaned, but the slipper would not fit. "May I try it on?" said Cinderella, stepping out of the shadows. So the two wicked stepsisters are trying to get that slipper to fit on their foot, but it's not fitting. So Cinderella had been watching from behind the curtain, and she asked if she could try it on. The glass slipper fit perfectly on Cinderella's tiny foot. "I have found my princess," cried the prince. "We shall wed tomorrow." On that festive day, the kingdom rejoiced. Generous and forgiving, Cinderella moved her family into the palace and found a lord of the court for each of her stepsisters to marry. So when she married the prince and moved into the castle, because she had such a kind heart, she had her whole family move with her. Cinderella's fairy godmother moved in too, just to make sure that everyone lived happily ever after. So that is the traditional and classic story of Cinderella. So now you guys can compare it with the Rough-Faced Girl, which is the Native American tale of their version of Cinderella. And you guys can compare the two stories and see how they're similar and kind of how they're different. But they're very similar in a lot of ways. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a good day, guys.